Welcome back to Small Changes, Big Shifts. I'm your host, Bailey Souza, and I'm solo showing it today. If you have started joining us watching the podcast online, you probably noticed that we're also virtual this month too. So June is a crazy month. So to all of our listeners out there that are feeling the speed of summer come maybe quicker than you expected, just know that we feel you and we see you as well. But June is also such a fun month because we have been highlighting the wonderful men that are in our life and being able to dive into their stories and what they've learned and what they want to share with the world in such a vulnerable way. And so I want to thank, Dr. Sean, who joined us last week. And today I'm joined with Brandon McAnderson, who we get to dive into more about his story and passion and what he wants to share with the world. And we're ending the next 2 weeks with men who are being vulnerable and are opening themselves up because they know that there's power in sharing your story. I personally asked Brandon to be on the show after getting to experience him at his wife's healing circle last month. And just some of the wisdom that he started the conversation with and the way that he was grounded and confident in himself. I figured our listeners needed to hear a bit of his story. So Brandon, welcome to Small Changes, Big Shifts.
Glad to be here. I'm glad you had a good experience.
I did. And I told Alex about it afterwards. I was like, that was my first circle with Brandon, and what a different energy. And so, for our listeners, you've heard us talk about Alex McAnderson, who is on our team at Your Wellness Connection, and she hosts these healing circles monthly at our facility. And Brandon stepped in at the last one and kind of helped hold this space. And what a different energy it brought to the space. And, I don't want to spend too much time on Alex, but giving her a shout out because I love her, and you are one lucky guy. But she does such great work for our community. And I think on the diving into our conversation today, thinking about partnership and how do you show up for your partner and show up for them authentically? And what advice would you give to people kind of figuring out what that looks like for them?
Well, I love talking about my wife, so I'm not going to reject there. What I would say is awareness has led to a good partnership. Being aware of what's going on around me, being aware of the role that I play in all of my relationships. But this one's the most important. This is my life's work. We have children together, we have community legacy, we have love for each other. And I care about that. So every day I want to be good at that. I've read books about, how to be a non-jealous lover. I've read Bell Hooks' book all about love. She's a feminist. It's, not what you would normally attribute to a man, but I don't want to be the normal man. I want to be a good partner. I don't want to be like people I see. I want to be the best version of me. And for me, that has meant not sacrificing. And I know that's kind of tough for people to hear in relationships, but I don't want to be married to a percentage of my partner. And I don't want my partner to be married to a percentage of me. And I don't want everything that I give to be a matter of reciprocity. That's scorekeeping. What I want to do is show up as the best version of myself and hold space for her to be the best version of herself. And it's not a matter of, what do you want to do? Because one of the things early in our relationship would be like, hey, you're having a girls' night? Wait, I get to have a boys' night. It's a justification for wanting to do what you want to do anyway. And then even in that agreement, in a sense, you were giving back a percentage of yourself in exchange for something else. And that's not really what you wanted to do. For me, going through it with my wife, I thought about it like she's been a mother in a different way than a father can be a father, like such a physical experience, an emotional experience, a chemical experience. And those chemicals tell you that you should just be someone's mom. And, you know, that's not what I wanted for her. I wanted to show up for her in a way to say, let me take the baby. This is my child. Let me learn. Let me have these bonding experiences so you can go out and find your life again. Because being a father and sacrificing, some of the things in my personal life pales in comparison to some of the physical exchanges mothers have to take. So for me, it's always keeping in mind that I'm not exchanging pleasantries for something I can gain back later. I'm giving her those things because I want her to have them because she deserves them. So I want to create space for her to find herself and be herself.
That's beautiful. And I love what you said about I don't want a percentage of my partner and I don't want my partner to have a percentage of me. In the same way of, there is this piece of you do have to sacrifice in relationships, whether it's personal relationships, whether it's your kids, whether it's your work environment, there is this level of sacrifice that just comes with life. And what I want our listeners to circle back to, or what really stood out for me was, but you always got to see what's bigger. And so, because you always saw the potential for what's bigger for your wife, for your children, for yourself, it makes those sacrifices make sense in the moment of I got to give a little more right here because it's feeding into what I can be, not I've got to give a little more to get a little more. And that's the biggest difference when it comes to sacrifice. And you brought up fatherhood, and I love talking about kids any chance that I get. I think motherhood has been my greatest life lesson. It will continue to be. But I did struggle with entering into that phase and feeling like a mom was all that I could be or all that I should be. When men are struggling with identity or what their role is in their own world and not just the external labels, how do you encourage men to dive deeper to find out more about who they are without the external labels as fatherhood and being a husband, etc.?
Yes. So ironically, I was just watching this Alan Watts video. It was an Alan Watts speech. I had listened to the book a while ago, but it was an art illustration surrounding a segment of a speech that he gave. And he talked about the myths of personhood, of our the things that we belong to. So when you say that, men are now in a position where they are asking for permission to feel and asking for permission to seek things out for their own self-improvement and enrichment. And it is anti what a man is supposed to be in this world. So how do you determine which agreements you're prisoner to and which ones you aren't? I suggest that you put them all down. One of the things, what I've been doing in meditation is I'm not a huge guided meditation guy. I like to hear my own voice. But my favorite meditation on YouTube is Muji. And what I like about Muji is he encourages you to do nothing in these meditations, to let these things go. And I feel like I've had so much energy to reallocate to this kind of self-growth. And the question that I asked myself was, Muji requires me to put all of my things down before I step into meditation so I can find that spot, right, that I really want to be in. Why do I have to pick those things back up? And what are those things? And how can I move through them? And that's kind of been the driving force for what I'm looking for. So my suggestion would be to men is you have a boss at work, you have a government structure, you have a lot of stringent systems you belong to that ask you things, that require things of you. You don't have to also be a part of those things when you come home. Like what you create outside of your home is your outer world, and what you create inside there is your inner world, your real world, right? You got to know the rules to play the game outside of that world you create for yourself, that safe haven. But you don't have to belong to them. And if you are looking at self-help as something you need to undo to even get to, that means you belong to a lot of programming that's not good for you. And accountability is tough in today's society. It's tough for people to be accountable. But in accountability, there is an element of acceptance. And in acceptance, there's an element of self-acceptance, which is a lot of the things that are troubling you are not your fault. Like no one asked to be overweight. No one knew about the effects of corn syrup and sugar and how that's affected cancer. People didn't ask for this. This was something that happened in a process of commerce. So now we find out through social media that they're using the same technology casinos use. You didn't ask to be addicted to your phone. That's the symptom. Like that's what has happened. That's an agreement that you made. But the question you have to ask yourself to get out of those situations is, why do they want my attention so bad? You know, what is it that they want? How can I make this a benefit for myself? So what I would say to men is to step outside the idea that you belong to all these places that aren't good for you. Because I know that's a far out thought for some people, but what in your life is voluntary and what in your life is involuntary, that is up to you. The structures that go on in your body and your life, that is involuntary, right? It's still perfect. So I think there's just ways that we can step away from things that don't feel good. And if it's in opposition to mental health, I would suggest you put that down.
I love the thought of, the acceptance piece of when you start to move through, you've accepted what's happened and you give yourself that grace to know that I didn't ask for this, but these are my circumstances. And how do I move forward? Or how do I, look at the lessons that I learned in this chapter to carry forward to this next best version of myself that I want to be? We had Don Carter on the show when I first started.
God is
Yes.
amazing.
He's
Amazing.
amazing. He was actually one of my first interviews when I first joined Dr. Robin, so I won't ever forget because I was so nervous. But one of the things that he shared when he's working with people is he asked them to just sit in silence for 3 minutes. And he's like, people struggle so hard to just sit with themselves. And it's because we're in a world that doesn't really allow us the space to just sit with ourselves and to hear our own inner thoughts and to ask those deeper questions. And so there's so much power that comes from, and I'm glad that you shared how, for you, it is hearing your own voice because there's so much power that comes from going within. And one of the things I wanted to talk about on the show today that you mentioned during the circle was this concept or the power of storytelling. And I think that understanding it in that twofold sense of the stories that we tell ourselves. So, can you share a little bit more about what the foundations or the stories that we tell ourselves and how that has an impact on us? And if you have any further insight of maybe some of the stories men have been telling themselves specifically that they can start to rewrite.
You know, our existence from a societal perspective has a lot to do with our storytelling, and it's a good thing. It's how we pass human history. It's how we pass mythology, stories, love. It's how we sing each other. It's such an important element of communication. I think the part that we don't spend time on is that moment of silence that you spoke of, that voice that you hear in your head. I think the first thing that you have to address is you are the voice in your head. And it doesn't always feel like that, but you are the voice in your head. And what I mean by that is a lot of the things that you tell yourself are projections of ego protection. You're actually protecting something, right? You have been judged for something. And for that reason, you judge that thing in someone else. So when you see someone and you see an imperfection, you're looking in a mirror. That's what people are talking about. You are seeing something that you don't like about yourself and you're projecting out into the world. So I think that's the first step of storytelling is that you have determined that this thing makes you incomplete or it makes you not like other people or it's something you never loved about yourself, that you can't find a way to love about yourself. So the storytelling is protecting you from that, right? It may have protected you in a moment you really needed it. It may have been when you were 6 or 7 and being bullied, or 11 and getting made fun of by your friend. There may have been some reason for that protection, but it's not something that you have to hold on to forever. So I think first off, it's tied to how storytelling leads to ego protection. Those two things are connected. And like I mentioned before, there's acceptance in saying there may have been something good about when I used ego protection to become this thing, because there was a moment that I felt unsafe, that I created a persona that I needed. The story has to move on from there because you can continue to tell yourself stories of hardship and they will continue to impact you like they've happened over and over again. Retelling the story doesn't change your truth, but how you tell the story might. So you can always take that didn't feel so good and take those little pieces of what you might have learned from those things. I'll give this example because I'm a Black man and image has been a heavy part of my existence. I was an athlete and I'm a bigger guy. So I've spent a lot of my life disarming people because I'm kind hearted. And that's what I want people to see about me the most. But that's not what they see. You can't see a Black man with braids and think, oh, he's soft and sweet, because that's not what the image of this world has, right? So I spent a lot of my energy disarming potential of something. That's storytelling, right? And you can make your story as legitimate as you want. Because as a Black man, is there an element of self-protection in that story? Absolutely. There's places where I'm unsafe that other people aren't. That's true. But telling myself that story of how that impacted me wasn't helping me. It wasn't helping me be better in those moments, helping me be more present for my people. It was me assimilating to a story that I was unsafe because of my physicality. So one, I was using a percentage of my energy to tell myself I was unsafe. And then I was using a percentage of my energy to let people know that I'm safe. Hey, everyone, I'm safe. And I had spent almost all my energy reserves just on self-protection of other people's fragility in service to a story I told myself about what that meant. That's hard, right? Because a Black man will come up to you and tell you that. My grandfather, my father will tell me that. They will say, this is how you protect yourself. And they're right. But I get to create my world. I get to create the universe and the world that I exist in. So storytelling is very important because one, it can reinforce negative stereotypes that you've had a hard time overcoming. And that can be related to race, identity, abuse, assault, any of these things. Telling yourself what you learned from those stories might help you progress from it. Reliving that pain is part of telling that story. So storytelling is very important to the person that we were and to the person that we want to become. And I'm not saying that everything's positive, and I'm not saying that you shouldn't have negative thoughts. I'm saying that if you do have a negative thought, you owe it to yourself to spend just as much time on the positive story, right? Because it's not as easy as I just won't tell myself negative stories. How about that? I wish it was that easy. The point is, if you do tell yourself a negative story, spend just as much time telling yourself a positive story. Like truly be there, because your positive energy is just as strong and valuable as your negative energy. That a lot of times for human beings manifests in storytelling.
I shared with you before we started recording that I've loved this series because I personally haven't been around a lot of men in my life that are open about their feelings and having these types of conversation and aren't so focused on that ego protection. I've never heard that before, but I mean, it makes a lot of sense of you've created this story that maybe you're telling yourself to protect your own ego, and it's maybe not true at all. And it may be something that you don't know really how others are thinking about you, but it is so ingrained in the way that you think about yourself that it's hard to really tell the difference between the two. And the other thing that I love that you brought up was the generational piece, and specifically talking about Black men and some of the struggles that they face. But there is that aspect of storytelling that you almost have to break some of those stereotypes of the generational stories that were passed down to be able to say, yes, that's true. Yes, I hear you. And that was your experience. And I am on a mission to break that cycle. I'm on a mission to create a different story for the Black men that come behind me. I am not getting stuck in that realm that our ancestors or past generations have been stuck in. And one of the things that I've had to work really hard on, because I cared a lot about what other people think about me for a long time. And so the storytelling wasn't always as much internal of what was I telling myself about who I was, but what was I telling myself about what everybody else was thinking about me all the time. And so one of my grounding questions is, how do you know that? If I get going down that path of Brandon's over here thinking Bailey is not the best co-host, I've been on better podcasts. If I get going down that rabbit hole, I have to ask myself, how do I know that? He hasn't said one thing indicating that. How do you know that? And so to our listeners out there, as Brandon said, if we all could just tell ourselves think positive all the time, we'd be in a way different world than what we're in today. It's not that simple. So two grounding moments to pause in the moment and say, how do you know that? If it comes to somebody else talking about you or what others maybe are thinking about you. And then second, what Brandon said, spend as much time in the positive as you did in the negative, because you owe that to yourself. And I think that's how you start to break the cycle within yourself, is stepping into the glass half full mindset and not looking at things from a problem perspective. And when working with people in the scholarship, I tell them all the time, it depends. If you're looking to be offended, you will be, right? So if I were to say, like, your hair looks so good and you're feeling confident and you love it, you're like, my hair looks good. But if it was a new style and you were nervous and I'm like, your hair looks good, you'd be like, does it really? Because if you're looking to be offended, you will be. And I think that being able to know who you are at your core allows for a lot of those moments to just pass through and not stick so heavy. And one of the things that we focus on at Small Changes is the generational change, is how are we breaking cycles? Because I believe that we have a duty to the next generation, whether it's not even just your lineage, but to the next generation to be better, to do better, to create a world that is better for them. And I know that you have very similar beliefs. What drives you to create generational change, and how are you mindful of that in your own life?
So I am a proud Black Latino man. I'm a first generation immigrant of the Dominican Republic. And the only way to tell this story is through my father and his father before him. So my father is from the Dominican Republic. He was adopted when he was 8 years old by a military man from Kansas City, Kansas, Paul McAnderson. Was a paratrooper on the Triple Nickel, which was the Army troop that immediately followed the Buffalo Soldiers, which was the first all black participated in World War II. So big history, big ancestry to be proud of, and big shoes to step into and fill. Well, when my father was 6 years old, they had a small uprising in the Dominican Republic, and they sent my grandfather because he was fluent in Spanish. And he met my grandmother, fell in love with her, and adopted my dad. My dad is the ultimate cycle breaker. He had 14 brothers and sisters, and he was the oldest. He loved sports, but his dad and his mom couldn't come to his games. They never did because they didn't have time. They had jobs, they had kids, they had things to do. I went on to play my college career at Kansas. I played a ton of football games, basketball games, soccer, track, baseball, you name it. My father never missed one event I played in. I'm talking about from 2004 all the way till 2008 till I was done playing. He didn't miss 1 second. He was determined that whatever his life circumstances were not going to be mine. And that goes beyond just showing up for me because that was important to him because he didn't have that. The other part was like how he treated his kids, how he showed up for us. He worked nights. So in the daytime, he would get up and he would take us to the gym and he would never say no. If it was something that we wanted that was part of our dreams, he would never say no. So I am this amazing cycle breaker because my father's refusal to accept his circumstances. He came to this country not being able to speak English and he didn't teach us Spanish. So one of the cycles that I'm trying to break is speaking Spanish. I want to have Spanish conversations with my father and my grandmother, aprendiendo todos los días. I'm very entusiasmado about learning Spanish and break from my father because he got teased when he spoke Spanish because he had an accent and he fought a lot. And for him, that was something he didn't want to give to us. My college about immigration and that cry. And it makes me want to cry right now that he didn't give that to us. But I'm going to give that to myself. Then I'm going to give that to him too, so that we can break that cycle. And my children are first generation Mexican immigrants. So I want to break that cycle with them as well, to be culture, to be a part of love, to be a part of family. And when I say my family is my life work, that's what I mean, because these are the things that will matter to me. I was a very decorated football player. Those things don't matter to me. You won't hear me talk about them. And it's not because of a piece of vanity. It's a piece of reality that the things that I have done moving forward have been more transformative and more important than those things.
I'm having so much fun learning more about you and really having this conversation from a perspective of what more can I do? And I think that's one thing for anybody that's around the McAndersons. I think that's a common theme I feel around you guys is this calling of what more can I do? Whether it's for my family, whether it's for my community, my culture, I think we all have that calling, some more than others, but we all have this calling of how do we make what's in front of us better and have our touch on it and our spin and our impact. And so, I think that men oftentimes aren't given that opportunity to one, think like that, or two, have these types of conversations. So, kind of as we're wrapping up the show today, if there's a man out there listening today who feels disconnected or isolated or that he has to carry everything on his own, what would you want him to know about the power of community and leaning on the people around you?
What I would want him to know is that the way that things are not for reasons that necessarily serve your success or your prosperity. And I'm not saying that to any type of man, but as a Black man, that's a daily reality for me, that there are not structures that were built for my success. And actually, the opposite is happening on a daily basis at the highest levels of government. Just is what it is, right? So If the rules weren't made for you to succeed, why do you belong to them? Why can't you make new rules? Why can't you today make an agreement to live your life based on the rules that feel good to you? One of my favorite Dr. Robin quotes, the legend, is pick thoughts that feel good to you. And that's simple, right? But it's true. Pick thoughts that feel good to you. Pick agreements that feel good to you. You can do all the things that you are intended to do and do all the things that you want to do. It's like I mentioned earlier from the Alan Watts thing. It's what is involuntary and what's voluntary. Who gets to make that determination? Ultimately, you do. And one of the things at the end of that speech, that quote that was there was, and I'm going to butcher it, but life is not a question meant to be answered. We're supposed to be experiencing these things. So as we're looking at wanting to be connected to something, we need to not look at that as a question. And like you said, how do you get into community? Experience, right? You don't need to ask the question, what's wrong with me? Why can't I create a personal life? You need to participate in community. And Kansas City is a beautiful place to do that. There's so many great organizations, Small Changes, Big Shifts, We Code KC, First Page, Hella Good Deeds, you name it. I mean, I'm an immigrant. I know I'm forgetting a whole bunch of people, but this place, there are unlimited opportunities to serve. And when you serve, you find your way back to connection with the people around you. I love the community circles every month because that's what you're getting. You're able to step into a sacred space where the agreements of men and women don't matter as much as they do outside of that space. So you can explore yourself freely and safely and ask questions and feel connected to other people and collectively heal. You can sit in that room and do nothing and heal. And that's with a lot of these things. That's with serving the unhoused. That's with, volunteering in your kid's school. All of these things give you an opportunity to feel connected to people because you are connected to people. You are of this organism, and this organism relies on you. This world needs your light.
What an inspiring answer, especially to somebody who feels overwhelmed and as if it's just this super far thing to reach for community and surrounding yourself with people, when really the answer is all you got to do is show up. I mean, truly, all you have to do is put yourself in the room, and it might take trial and error of finding out what room really fills your cup. But really, it just takes you getting into the room. And please don't discount that because it is just as valuable to know what you don't like as it is to know what you like. And so experience new things. And you said it best. Kansas City is a hidden gem. I don't think I even realize all of the ways that we have community in this space. I am blown away each week by the nonprofits and the work that they're doing to build community, create it, make it safe, make it educational, and invite others in. It's a beautiful opportunity. So we'll put some of the links for the organizations that Brandon listed. Alex's next healing circle is going to be at Your Wellness Connection on June 24th. So I will put the link in the show notes for that as well if you feel called to join. And for any listeners that want to stay connected to you or follow along with what you've got going on, what's the best way for them to do that?
So I am not really using social media right now. I have called in my attention, but my Instagram is Brando_Mac35. So that's on Instagram. I mostly do KU football stuff. I am the sideline reporter. I have a podcast and stuff. So this summer I'll start kicking up some social media and hopefully we'll cross paths at some point.
There you go. We'll put all of Brandon's information for how you can stay connected with him and the work that he's doing in the show notes. And next week, we hope that you join us back as we continue the month of June, just highlighting the wonderful men in our community and giving them the opportunity to pour into our listeners at a way that Dr. Robin and I just truly cannot do. It's a perspective that no matter how grounded or how well diverse we are or how involved in community in, it's not our story to tell and it's not our advice to give. And so I'm grateful that we have the men that have shown up for this series to be able to share their stories in such a vulnerable way, knowing that somebody out there needs to hear it. So Brandon, thank you so much for joining us on Small Changes, Big Shifts. And until next time, we're sending you all big heart to heart hugs.